very pleased, like everybody else, to be with you here today. But I guess I'm a bit of an oddball among my fellow speakers, partly because I talk about pronunciation, which seems to make you a bit of an eccentric. Somebody, actually, a colleague from another university, did once say to me on discovering that my research area is pronunciation, "Oh, I didn't think you were a pronunciation freak." So partly for that, partly because actually I don't work in EAL anyway. I work in English as an international language, EIL. And since my doctoral research in the 80s, that's been my area. So in a sense, I'm a bit of a gatecrasher. But nevertheless, I think what I've got to say does have important implications for EAL. And I think I also share with some of my fellow speakers the fact that I have been around for quite a long time in my own field. Now, when I was originally invited to come and speak about pronunciation, I had intended to focus more on political issues, things to do with what are appropriate accents, models, targets, that sort of thing. Hence the title I gave my talk. But when I started to prepare it, I realised that actually there wasn't any debate to engage with about pronunciation, about accents. I found virtually no references to pronunciation in the national curriculum documents that I looked at, or in any of the EAL literature, except for one article in a Naldic publication, not surprisingly, and written by me. Now, as I didn't really want to set up a straw man, or straw woman for that matter, to knock down, I switched my emphasis from the way pronunciation is treated in EAL to the fact that it isn't actually treated at all, as far as I can tell. Now, I'm concerned about pronunciation in the context of EAL because all the evidence I've seen suggests that it is very important to EAL speakers' lives in a whole range of ways. Not only because it's a major factor, and I think some research is showing it is the major factor in their intelligibility for English mother tongue speakers and in their own understanding of mother tongue speakers, because of course what people usually forget is that pronunciation is a listening activity as well as a speaking one. But also there's evidence that EAL students believe that their accents have a negative impact on their lives in terms of things like attitudes that people have towards them, lack of respect that's shown to them, repercussions in job interviews, in their dealings with the law and so on. And this afternoon I'll be showing examples of what they themselves have to say about this and how it makes them want to improve their pronunciation, because they believe they'll be treated better with less of a foreign accent. So my first point then is that there needs to be pronunciation teaching for EAL students in dedicated classes outside mainstream teaching. I'm not qualified to talk about grammar and vocabulary, but for pronunciation I'm pretty sure that most students over the age of around 6 years old won't be able to acquire what they need pronunciation-wise by osmosis in group work with English mother tongue students. They need explicit focus, practice opportunities and feedback. So my second point is then the problem of identifying what the target of this pronunciation teaching would actually be. The national curriculum is very vague when it comes to defining the terms. As I've said, there's very little reference to pronunciation at all, but even where it is mentioned, it's not clear what they mean. They say things like appropriate tone of voice. Well, is my tone of voice now appropriate? I honestly couldn't tell you. They talk about sounds. Well, what are they? Speaking clearly, using appropriate emphasis. I mean, okay, there are ways to judge appropriate emphasis, but what are they? No, nobody's telling the teachers. And especially, there are many, many references in the documents that I've looked at on the ability to use standard English in your speech. Now, what does it mean? What should EAL students be aiming for pronunciation-wise in terms of standard English? By standard, do they mean the accent that people wrongly call standard pronunciation. I'm talking about the received pronunciation accent, RP. Now, received pronunciation, if anybody doesn't know, would be, I suppose, a posher version of my London accent. I mean, I couldn't call myself an RP speaker because I can hear myself doing a lot of things that wouldn't be considered correct RP. I mean, I use a lot of glot stops, for example. I hope I won't offend anybody by saying that RP is a minority British accent. It's largely restricted to middle-class, middle-aged English mother tongue speakers from the southeast of England. So it's not exactly appropriate for teenagers and 20-somethings. Actually, my middle-class children, 19 and 23 years old, don't have RP at all. But okay, if RP isn't what is intended by standard, what should students be aiming for? EAL students, I mean here. The point is that the abstract term standard isn't any help. Teachers need something concrete to teach and students to learn. Now, my suggestion is that EAL approaches pronunciation in the way that I've done for many years in terms of English as an international language. It's a rather different context. English as an international language means non-native speakers of English talking to other non-native speakers where they don't share a first language, particularly in places like mainland Europe and Southeast Asia. And I should say that the research there would be a need to do some EAL dedicated research to gauge the precise applications of what I'm suggesting. But I think it's a very good starting point. And what I've done for EIL is think in terms of a core rather than a model. And the core is based on empirical evidence that shows what is really essential in speakers' pronunciation for them to be intelligible to their target listeners, which in EIL's case is another non-native speaker. But what it leads to is that there are a fairly small number of features, pronunciation features, that people need to actually acquire to be intelligible. This is the core. This can be taught explicitly, and then everything else is non-core, and it's left to individual learner choice. So if they want to be more native-like in their accent, that's their choice. Then they try to learn a bit more. If they don't want to, they don't bother. And of course there are identity issues here, especially I think for EAL learners. It'll depend, what they want to do will depend on their orientation to their own mother tongue. So for example, if they use their mother tongue a lot in the community and at home and so on, they may feel that that's where their identity is and they don't need to express their identity in their English. And there are very, very well established close links between accent and identity, so this is particularly relevant to this decision that they're going to make. And this afternoon I'll be explaining how all this works in practice and what the implications are for EAL teacher education. But for now I'd just like to finish by saying that we shouldn't forget that communication is a two-way process. And I think that English mother tongue speakers, as part of their English education, should have their awareness raised of the existence of World English accents and of the language rights of those speakers, and that in a multicultural society, the effort shouldn't all be in one direction. Thank you.